You've arrived at Nightly Narrative Journal. Settle in, find a gentle breath, and let the quiet of the night take over. If peaceful stories help you drift off, feel free to subscribe. It truly supports the journey we share here. Now, allow the story to begin. The world was frozen. The sky was a merciless mixture of pale gray and white tones, the horizon blurred with the cold gleam of ice masses stretching into infinity. The sun could only send a faint light from behind the thick cloud cover. By the time this light reached the earth, it had already lost all its warmth. 20,000 years ago, these lands were paradise. Now they were a hell where one had to fight to find the slightest sign of life. The tribe was beginning to wake at the edge of the temporary camp where they had sheltered during the night. Bodies wrapped in layers of hide and fur were emerging from the brief relief that sleep brought, once again confronting the harsh face of reality. The cold penetrated to the bones. Each breath created a cloud of vapor in the air. Every movement was a struggle against the resistance of frozen muscles. Call was one of the tribe's most experienced hunters. Although he was in his early 40s, having reached this age in the harsh conditions of the Ice Age was proof of his wisdom and strength. His face was lined with the marks of wind and cold. His eyes were as deep as a frozen lake and filled with accumulated experience. His hands bore the calluses and scars that years had brought. These were the marks that were the price of survival. Call slowly walked around the camp. His eyes caught on the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Years of experience had taught him to read the language of nature. These clouds were not ordinary. Their shapes, colors, and movement patterns heralded an approaching disaster. The wind, though still blowing gently, was a silent warning of the danger it harbored. Mira was one of the tribe's youngest mothers. In her arms, she held Torin, her son who was only 3 years old. The child's face had turned pink from the cold. His small hands clung tightly to his mother's fur garment. On Mira's face was every mother's universal expression: worry, protective instinct, and infinite love. The ruthlessness of the Ice Age intensified these feelings even more. Call those clouds. Mira's voice trembled in the wind. Call turned his head. He could see the fear in the woman's eyes. I know, he said simply. Words were wasting extra energy in the cold. Everyone knew what was coming. Great storms could last for days, could wipe out an entire tribe. To be caught in the open meant dancing with death. Old Nara was the tribe's storyteller and wise woman. Her hair was as white as snow. Every wrinkle on her face was a piece of wisdom from the past. Though her hands trembled, the sharpness in her eyes had never faded. She sat by the fire. The flames were like orange fingers dancing in the darkness. Our ancestors saw such storms, said Nara. Her voice cracked but strong. When the sky becomes angry, the wise hide, even mountains bow. Who are we to resist? The tribe was slowly gathering. There were 17 of them. Men, women, elders, and children. Each was a survivor of this frozen world. On their faces were the marks of hunger, exhaustion, and endless struggle. But in their eyes, the spark of life still glowed. This was humanity's greatest miracle. The refusal of hope to die, even in the darkest times. Young hunter Rukan had returned from the hunt in the early hours of the morning. In his hand was a small rabbit. Frozen, hard, but still valuable. The tribe's food reserves were at critical levels. Every morsel was a gift. Every bite was a chance to live another day. I saw a mammoth herd to the east, said Rukin, out of breath. They're moving south, moving fast, as if they're running from something. Cole's brows furrowed. Mammoths were nature's largest creatures. Their massive bodies were covered with long woolly fur. Their tusks were magical crescents. But now, even these giant animals were running. This showed the magnitude of what was coming. How much time do we have? Mira's voice had sharpened. Cole looked at the sky. The clouds were moving as if they were a living being. Spreading, thickening, approaching. The wind had suddenly increased its intensity. The air was charged with electricity. Everything was a harbinger of the approaching chaos. Not much, said Cole. Maybe a day, maybe less. We need to move. Now. The camp suddenly sprang into action. Everyone knew their task. Survival meant organization. Chaos meant death. While the women prepared the children, the men gathered their few belongings: hide tents, poles, stone tools, food reserves. Everything was valuable. Everything had to be carried. Old Nara slowly stood up. Her bones creaked, but her determination was stronger than a young warrior's. There's a cave to the west, she said. In my youth, we sheltered there. Deep protected. If it's still there. How far? Cole asked. 2 days' walk. Maybe 3, with the children and elders. 2 days. The storm would arrive in less than 1 day. The mathematics was merciless, but there was no other choice. To stay here was certain death. To move was at least a chance. Get ready. Cole's voice was like a command. We're moving immediately. The sun was rising faintly behind the clouds. The light was cold and distant. The snow cover stretched in every direction like an endless white sea. On the horizon, glaciers rose like giant walls. These were ice rivers that stretched to the end of the world, moving, destroying everything. The tribe was making its final preparations. Everyone had as much load on their backs as they could carry. Children were taken in the arms of the elders. Hunters checked their spears and stone knives. Every step would be a step on the line between death and life. Mira strapped Torin to her back. The child was silent. His eyes were deep and understanding. Despite his young age, he had grasped the world. Here, there was no luxury of asking questions or complaining. Survival was the only rule. The wind increased its intensity again. This time, it carried sharp ice particles. These particles hitting faces were like thousands of tiny needles. The sky was growing darker. Time was running out rapidly. Walk, Cole commanded, and the tribe began to advance across the frozen lands toward the unknown. The first steps were always the hardest. The frozen ground created a slippery and hard surface under the feet. Each step had to be taken carefully. A slip, a fall, could mean a broken bone, and in the Ice Age, a broken bone most often meant a death sentence. The tribe was advancing in single file. Cole was in front, showing the way. Then came the young hunters. Then the women and children. And at the back were the elders. This order was the product of thousands of years of experience. The strong would clear the path ahead, the weak would be protected, and the experienced would provide support from behind. The wind was getting stronger by the minute. At first it was like a gentle breeze. Now it had become a sharp force. It struck faces, burned eyes, made breathing difficult. Cole pulled his fur cap tighter. His eyes constantly scanned the horizon. Danger could await at any moment on the road. Crevasses, wild animals, glacier breaks. Coming from the north, said Rukin, coming to Call's side. The young man's face had turned bright red from the cold. The storm. It will sweep everything away. Call nodded. He didn't want to waste too much breath talking. Every breath was valuable. Oxygen was scarcer in the cold air. The lungs had to work harder. Behind, Mira was struggling to move forward. Torin was a heavy burden on her back, but it was impossible to leave him. The child clung silently to his mother's back. His small face looked out from among the furs. His eyes were curious, but not fearful. Not yet. Fear would come with time. Old Nara was slowly advancing with the other elders. Every step was an explosion of pain. Bones had aged, joints had stiffened, but the wool was strong. Death had not yet been accepted. Life was a struggle to be fought until the last breath. Brother, said the old man beside her, Torg. His voice was raspy. I think I'm slowing down. Maybe I should stay. Hush. Nara's voice was sharp. No one stays behind. We all go together. But I'm slowing down the tribe. You are the tribe. The tribe doesn't abandon you. These simple words were the fundamental philosophy of Ice Age humanity. The individual existed for the tribe. The tribe existed for the individual. Unity was the only way to survive. Progress was slow, maybe 3-4 kilometers per hour. In normal times, this would be an unacceptable speed, but now, every step was an achievement. The landscape was monotonous. White, gray, frozen. On the horizon, glaciers rose like unreachable mountains. Some were hundreds of meters high, gleaming with a bluish brilliance in the sunlight. At midday, as far as could be determined from the sun's position, the tribe took a short break. Everyone was tired. Breaths mixed with the air as heavy vapor clouds. Hands and feet had gone numb. Movement was necessary to keep the blood circulating. To stop meant to freeze. Call pulled out pieces of dried meat from a small leather pouch. Each person got a small bite. It wasn't enough, but nothing was ever enough. Hunger was a constant companion of the Ice Age. The human body had learned to function on minimum calories to survive. Look, Rukin said in a sudden whisper, pointing his finger north. Everyone's eyes turned. On the horizon, a dark cloud mass was rising, but this was not an ordinary cloud. It covered almost half the sky. Lightning flashed within it. Its color was a terrifying mixture of black and purplish tones, as if the sky itself was collapsing. The gods are angry, someone whispered. Nature is angry, Cole corrected, and it doesn't care. We must hurry. But looking at the sky, everyone grasped the magnitude of the storm. This was not an ordinary snowstorm. This was the kind of storm that would bring the end of the world. The winds could uproot and throw rocks. Snow could bury even mountains. Cold could freeze everything. Mira hugged Torn tighter. She whispered in the child's ear, Don't be afraid, my child. Mother is here. Always here. Torn didn't answer. His small face was serious. His eyes looked at the approaching darkness. His small mind, perhaps, couldn't fully grasp it, but his instincts sensed the danger. The tribe moved again, this time faster. But speed increased fatigue. The dilemma was clear. Moving fast consumed energy. Moving slowly wasted time. Finding balance was vital. In the afternoon, the landscape began to change. The flat glacier plains gradually transformed into rugged terrain. Here, There were frozen riverbeds. Waters that once flowed now stood as hard ice columns. The beauty was eerie. Nature was art, even in its most ruthless form. Careful, Call warned. There may be cracks under the ice. Indeed, thin lines could be seen here and there on the ice surface. These were signs of voids underneath. One miscalculated step could cause the ice to crack and fall through. Below, deadly darkness awaited. The group advanced carefully. Every step was tested. Call poked the ice with his staff from the front. A solid sound meant safe. A hollow sound meant danger. The wind was now howling. The sound was like a high-pitched whistle. Ears were filled with this sound. Communication had become difficult. Everyone communicated with hand signals. Words were lost in the wind. Evening was approaching. Light was rapidly diminishing. In the Ice Age, the length of nights was frightening. Darkness could last for hours, and to move in the dark was suicide. "We need to camp here," Rukan shouted against the wind. Call nodded, but his heart was heavy. The camp would not have the strength to withstand the storm, but there was no other option. To continue walking in the darkness was a greater disaster. The tribe took shelter behind a small glacier protrusion. This provided minimal protection against the wind. Hide tents were hastily erected. But everyone knew these tents would not withstand the coming storm. Old Nara tried to light a fire, but the wind extinguished every effort. Hands trembled, stones rubbed, sparks flew, but flames wouldn't live. Finally, a few young people formed a shield around one of the tents. In a small area protected from the wind, finally a small fire was lit. The flames danced in the deep darkness. Yellow, orange, red. The colors of life, the colors of hope. Everyone gathered around the fire. The stretching of hands, efforts to warm up, silent prayers. As night fell, the storm had approached fully. The sky was now completely dark. Stars were not visible. The moon was imprisoned behind the clouds. The wind howled madly. The sound was like a monster's roar. "Tomorrow," Call said quietly, "we must not stop. We must reach the cave before the storm comes." Everyone knew this, but fatigue was crushing bones. Sleeplessness was clouding minds. Hunger was cramping stomachs. The night would be long and dark. Perhaps the last night. Before dawn broke, the tribe moved again. No one had slept, only experienced a light drowsiness. The cold prevented deep sleep. Bodies remained constantly active with the shivering reflex. This consumed energy, but was necessary to survive. Tents were gathered. Loads were prepared. Everyone's movements were automatic. Thousands of years of evolution had made this routine instinctive, fast, silent, efficient. When the first light appeared, the landscape was terrifying. During the night, the storm had drawn even closer. The clouds were now right above their heads. Dark masses seemed to be colliding in the sky. Lightning flashed within them. Each lightning bolt brought thunder. The sound struck ears, shook chests. "Fast!" Call's command was clear. Very fast. The group moved at almost a running pace. But this speed could not be sustained for children and elders. Within the first half hour, the difficulty became obvious. Old Torek stumbled, fell to the ground. Nara and others immediately rushed to his side. "I can get up," Torek growled. Pride was the old man's last weapon. But his hands were trembling. His legs no longer wanted to carry his weight. Two young men held Torek under his arms. Half supporting, half carrying, they continued to advance. This slowed the pace even more. But leaving him behind was unthinkable. Mira felt Torin's weight on her back. The child wasn't complaining. His small fingers clung tightly to his mother's fur. His breath touched Mira's neck. Warm, alive, precious. The landscape was changing. They had now left the flat glacier areas behind. Ahead of them stretched rugged terrain. Here were glacier formations formed thousands of years ago. Mounds, pits, cracks. Each was an obstacle. Left, Call directed. His eyes were locked on the terrain. Experience enabled him to choose the safest passage. The group turned left. But here, there was a new danger. A glacier crevasse. Its width was 3 meters, its depth uncertain. Darkness rose from the abyss. A cold wind blew from below. "We'll jump." Cole made his decision. The young hunters jumped first. It was easy. Their legs were strong. Then the women. Most succeeded. But one woman almost fell, slipping. At the last moment, a hand reaching from the other side caught her. The turn came for the children. Torin separated from his mother. His small face was determined, his eyes focused on the other side. A run, a jump, the small body flew through the air. On the other side, he landed safely. A breath escaped from Mira's chest. She was relieved. For the elders, the crevasse was a harder obstacle. Torek was lifted across. Nara tried to jump on her own. But her body no longer obeyed her. As she jumped, the distance was insufficient. She began to fall. Immediately, several hands reached out. Nara's arms were caught. She struck the edge of the crevasse. Pain enveloped her body. But the hands held firmly. She was pulled up, brought to safety. "Thank you," she said breathlessly. Words were unimportant. Actions were everything. The group continued to advance, but the incidents had reduced time even more. The sun, even though invisible, was rising in the sky, and with it, the storm too. Toward noon, the first snowflakes began to fall, at first light, almost gentle, then denser, and denser still. Within minutes, the air filled with snowflakes. Visibility decreased, first 50 meters, then 20, then 10. "Don't lose each other," Call shouted. His voice was drowning in the snowstorm. A rope was found. Everyone held onto this rope, in single file. As the group advanced along the rope, they stayed together, but movement became harder. Snow was accumulating on the ground. Feet were sinking in the snow. Each step was harder than the previous one. The wind was now merciless. More than blowing, it was pushing. Bodies fought against the wind, bending, keeping balance, not falling. A constant struggle. Mira felt it. Torin's body had cooled. The child was still moving, but energy was decreasing. Hypothermia was a silent killer. It would come slowly, do its work unnoticed. "Torin," she shouted, "talk to me." "Cold mother." The child's voice was weak. "I know, darling, but let's endure. The cave is close." Was it a lie? Maybe. But hope was sometimes more valuable than reality. In the afternoon, the group stopped by a small rock formation. Here, the wind was partially blocked. A chance to breathe. A chance to check bodies. Cole looked around. The snowstorm was now so dense that 3 meters away couldn't be seen. The tribe was lost in a white labyrinth. The sense of direction was blurred, but his instincts showed him the way. West, he said to himself. The cave is to the west. But was he really sure? In the snowstorm, finding direction was nearly impossible. The sun was invisible. There were no stars. Just white, white everywhere. Listen, old Nara suddenly spoke. Everyone stopped, ears opened. Under the howling sound of the wind, there was another sound. Deep, loud, coming from a distance. Rumble. An earthquake-like sound. Glacier shift, Rukin whispered. Glaciers were not stationary. They moved. Slowly, centimeter by centimeter. But sometimes, they would suddenly slide. Thousands of tons of ice would move at once, would crush everything in its path. Away from there, Call commanded. The sound was coming from the left. The group needed to turn right. Movement was now panic. Not walking, but running. But running in snow was a terrible experience. Falls, stumbles, but getting up, running again. The rumble sound approached. Then, moved away. The glacier shift had passed by them. Danger was temporarily prevented, but energy was exhausted. Evening approached. Darkness was coming again, and the cave was still far away. When they stopped to camp for the night, the group was completely exhausted. The tents provided no protection against the snowstorm. The wind pierced through hide and furs. Cold seeped inside. Lighting a fire was impossible. Sparks went out instantly. Everyone huddled together. Body heat was the only salvation. Children were placed in the center. Elders were surrounded by young bodies. This was a primitive but effective method. As a group, warmth could be maintained. Darkness was absolute. There was no light. The snowstorm had completely taken away the sense of sight. Only sounds existed. The howling of the wind, the tapping of snowflakes, people's breathing. Mira pressed Torin to her chest. She could feel the child's heartbeat. He was still alive, still fighting. This was enough for her. Once upon a time, old Nara's voice rose in the darkness. The world was warm. Everyone listened. Stories were the Ice Age's television. Entertainment, wisdom, hope. The ancestors of my ancestors' ancestors saw green forests. Warm sun touched their skin. There were fruit trees. Animals lived in abundance. People were happy. Is it real? Torin's small voice asked. Real, my child. Long ago. And perhaps, one day, it will be again. When? The gods know. But hope is important. Hope keeps us alive. The words were simple, but their effect was deep. In the darkness, everyone imagined that warm world. Greenery, sun, abundance. The dream lightened the pain. Throughout the night, the storm continued its fury. Snow piled on top of the tents. Masses formed. Almost buried them. But inside, people persisted. Breathed. Lived. With dawn, if it could be called dawn, because everywhere was still dark, the group moved again. Bodies were frozen. Fingers were numb. But they had to move. To stop was to accept death. The snowstorm had slightly diminished. Now 10 meters could be seen. A small improvement, but sufficient. Call searched for the way. Snow had changed everything. Familiar markers were buried, but his instincts guided him. West. Always west. The group slowly advanced. Feet sank deep in the snow. Sometimes up to the knees. Sometimes to the waist. Each step was a tremendous effort. But they continued. In the afternoon, A miracle occurred. The snowstorm suddenly stopped. The wind ceased. The air calmed. And for the first time in 2 days, the sky appeared. Still cloudy, still gray, but it wasn't snowing. Visibility had opened, and in the distance, something appeared. There, Cole pointed. Everyone's eyes turned. On the horizon, there was a dark spot. Rock, a large rock formation, and at its base, cave. Nara's voice trembled. I remember. That's it. Hope spread through the group. Like electricity. Fatigue seemed to lighten suddenly. The goal could now be seen. But distance was deceiving. The cave looked far. Maybe an hour. Maybe two. Estimating distance in the glacier landscape was a difficult science. The group accelerated as much as possible, but they were still slow. Snow continued to hinder. The ground was slippery and dangerous. Half an hour later, a new landscape appeared before them. Ahead, a giant mammoth herd was there. At least 20 animals. Large, magnificent, woolly. Their long tusks reflected the sunlight. Their eyes looked deep. Stop, Cole commanded. Mammoths were not dangerous, if not provoked. But when in a herd, one had to be careful. A panicked mammoth could crush anything. The herd was moving slowly. Southward, in the same direction the tribe was going. Luck was on their side. Quietly, Cole whispered. Don't disturb them. The group passed 100 meters away from the mammoths. The animals noticed them. A few heads turned. Eyes watched. But there was no attack. Only observation. Young Torrent watched the mammoths in wonder. These were the largest creatures he had seen in his life. His eyes had widened. His mouth was open. Mother big, he whispered. Yes, my child. And they're strong. They would crush us. That's why we're quiet. The herd slowly moved away. The tribe breathed a sigh of relief. Danger had once again been prevented. The cave now appeared more clearly. A dark mouth at the base of the rock. It promised hope. It promised safety. The final approach brought the hardest moments. To reach the rock formation, a steep slope had to be climbed, covered with ice. Slippery. Dangerous. Cole went first. He carefully placed his hands and feet. Each grip was tested. Slowly, he climbed up. Then, he dropped a rope. Hold on, he shouted. One by one, the group climbed. Young hunters were easy. Women struggled but succeeded. Children were carried on backs. For the elders, the climb was hell. Torek almost gave up, but Nara pushed from behind him. No, she said. We've come this far. We won't give up now. Effort mixed with pain. But finally, everyone was up. And the cave was before them. The cave's mouth looked dark and inviting. About 4 meters wide, 3 meters high. From inside, a cold air current was blowing, but much lighter than the storm outside. Cole carefully entered inside. His spear was ready. In caves, unexpected dangers could exist. Cave bears, snow leopards, even other human groups. Everything was possible. Inside, it was very dark at first. Eyes had to adjust to the light. Slowly, shapes became distinct. The cave extended deep inside. The ceiling was high. The floor was relatively flat and dry. The walls were wet but solid. Clear, Cole shouted. You can come. The group rushed inside with relief. For the first time in 2 days, they felt protected from the wind. The cave wasn't perfect. It was still cold, but compared to outside, it was like paradise. Everyone collapsed to the ground. Fatigue suddenly descended upon them. Adrenaline had been exhausted. Bodies now refused to move. But it was not time to rest. Survival was a constant effort. Cole distributed tasks. We need fire. Gather wood. The young hunters advanced to explore the depths of the cave. They were lucky. Inside, they found old dry branches, perhaps swept in by floodwaters years ago, but now they were perfect as fuel. Nara took out her stones and flints. Her hands were trembling, but there was experience. She rubbed the stones. Sparks flew. Dry leaves and shavings had been prepared. The spark caught. A small flame formed. Breaths were carefully blown. The flame grew. Branches were added. The fire began to live. The flames illuminated the cave. The walls were covered with dancing shadows. Heat slowly spread. Hands were extended. Faces turned to the fire. For the first time, they felt real warmth. Mira checked Torin's clothes. The child was frozen. His fingers were white. His lips were blue. Hypothermia symptoms. Why? Torin asked. Why do we fight so hard to survive? The question surprised with its depth. A philosophical question from a small child. Nara smiled. Because life is precious. Every breath is a gift. Every day is a miracle. And maybe one day, the world will warm again. It will be green. Our children's children will see that world, but only if we survive now. Torin slowly nodded. Did he understand? Maybe not fully, but he felt it. As the fire lowered, people began to sleep, leaning against each other. Warming. They were together throughout life. The tribe was a single organism, and every part mattered. Cole stayed awake. He was keeping watch. His eyes were locked on the cave's mouth. Outside, the storm continued with fury. Snow was piling like mountains. The wind seemed to shake even the rocks. How long will it last? He murmured to himself. There was no answer. Only the howling of the wind. Morning came with the faint light coming from the cave's mouth. The storm was still continuing, but its intensity had decreased. No longer a destructive force, just a dangerous presence. The tribe began to wake. Bodies were stiff and aching. Sleep was insufficient. But there were no complaints. They were alive. This was the only important fact. The fire had almost gone out during the night. Nara quickly added new branches. The flames revived. Warmth slowly returned. Breakfast didn't exist. Food reserves were critical. Call decided. Only one meal a day. Evening. This way, they could last 2 more days. And then? Rukan asked. Then we hunt. Call repeated. There may be animals near the cave. Rabbits, foxes. Small, but sufficient. Hunt in a storm? If necessary, yes. The conversation was practical, not emotional. Survival left no room for emotions. The day passed slowly. Inside the cave, activity was minimal. To conserve energy, movements were minimal. People mostly sat by the fire, talked, thought, waited. Torin explored the cave's walls. His small hands touched the stone. Cold, rough, ancient. Here thousands of years ago. Perhaps other people had also sheltered. Perhaps other children had also touched these walls. Mother, look. Torin discovered something. Mira approached. On the wall, There were faint lines, man-made, ancient pictures, animal figures, perhaps hunting scenes, perhaps rituals. Our ancestors, Nara, came beside them. They lived here, just like us. They survived, just like us. The discovery boosted the group's morale. They were not alone. History was with them. Generations had fought the same struggle and had succeeded. In the afternoon, an incident occurred. Old Torek suddenly had trouble breathing. His chest tightened. His face paled. His hands went to his chest. "Help," he whispered. Nara was immediately beside him. "What's happening?" "Pain. So much pain." The group gathered. But there wasn't much to do. There was no medicine, no doctor. Only hands, faces, and prayers. Torek slowly closed his eyes. His breathing decreased, then stopped. Silence filled the cave. Death was common in the Ice Age, but it was never easy. Nara didn't cry, just stroked her old friend's forehead. "Rest in peace, brother." Young Rukan asked, "What will we do?" "We must bury him," Call answered. "But outside isn't possible. When the storm ends, then." Torak's body was carried to a far corner of the cave, covered with a fur. Respect was shown. The group returned to around the fire, but the atmosphere had changed. Death had reminded them of reality. They were mortal. The storm was not just an external enemy. The real enemy was time, hunger, cold, old age. "Life is short," Nara spoke quietly, "but precious." Torek lived a long life, longer than most of us. Now he's with his ancestors, not suffering, not feeling hunger. At peace. The words tried to console, but pain was always there. When evening came, it was time to eat. Call carefully divided the meat, a small portion for each person. Torak's share would now be divided. A bitter irony. The meal was eaten in silence. Chewing sounds, the crackling of fire. There was no other sound. Near nightfall, Mira sang a song to Torin, ancient, lullaby-like. Words had been passed from generation to generation. The melody was simple, but beautiful. "The ice will melt one day, the sun will come again. The world will be green, wait. Just wait." Torin slowly drifted to sleep. His small face was peaceful. Perhaps in his dream, he was seeing that green world. As night progressed, the storm slowed down. The wind was no longer howling. Snowfall lightened, and for the first time, stars appeared. The clouds had opened. The sky was an infinite darkness. But in that darkness, countless points of light were shining. Call went to the cave's mouth, looked outside. The landscape was unique. Snow had covered everything. White, perfect, endless. Stars illuminated this whiteness. Beauty was eerie. "The storm is ending." Nara came beside him. "Yes," Call confirmed. "Tomorrow we can go outside. And then? Then we continue to live. We hunt. We find food. We survive." Nara smiled. "Simple, isn't it? Simple, but hard." Both looked at the stars. For thousands of years, humanity had been looking at these stars, wondering, dreaming, and surviving. Morning began with sun rays. Real sun. The clouds had almost completely dispersed. The sky was a clear blue. Light filtered into the cave. Warm, soft, miraculous. The group slowly woke. Eyes looked at the light. After a long time, real sun, hope was reborn. Cole was the first to go outside. Snow reached up to his knees, but the sky was clear. The air was calm. The storm had truly ended. Safe, he shouted. You can come outside. The group slowly emerged from the cave. Sunlight touched faces, warm, comforting, eyes dazzled. But it was a beautiful dazzle. The landscape had changed dramatically. Familiar landmarks from before the storm were now buried. Snow mountains covered everything, but the beauty was undeniable. White, pure, endless. Let's bury Torek, Call said. The men began to dig snow with stone tools. It was hard work. The snow was frozen and compressed. But hours later, a suitable hole was opened. Torak's body was gently placed. Furs were spread over him. Everyone looked one last time, said goodbye. Nara recited a prayer. Ancient words. Incomprehensible, but meaningful. Go to your ancestors, brother. They're waiting for you. Rest in peace. May your trace be eternal. Snow was filled over the hole. A mound formed. A simple grave, but honorable. The ceremony ended. The group returned to the cave. Now, it was time to focus on practical matters. Food. Survival. Cole and the young hunters prepared for hunting. Spears, stone knives. Simple, but effective. Look for rabbit tracks nearby, Cole instructed. Small animals, easily hunted. The team moved away from the cave. Walking in snow is hard, but not impossible. Eyes focused on tracks on the ground. An hour later, Rukan found something. Look here. In the snow, small paw prints. Rabbit. Fresh. Maybe an hour ago. The group followed the tracks. Carefully, quietly. Hunting required patience. Haste would scare away the prey. The tracks led to a small pile of rocks. Here, there was probably a burrow. The rabbit was hiding inside. Call set up a strategy. Some would block the burrow's exit. Others would frighten the rabbit out. The plan was executed. Stones were thrown. Sounds were made. And the rabbit burst out in panic. A spear flew through the air. Found its target. The rabbit fell to the ground. We did it, Rugen shouted breathlessly. A small victory, but important. Food had been secured. Life would continue for another day. On the way back, Call noticed something else. In the distance, a mammoth herd was visible. The same herd they had encountered before. Now, they had stopped in the south, grazing or trying to graze. Finding food under the snow was a difficult task. Can we hunt mammoths? Rugen asked. Call shook his head. Too dangerous. Too big. If it goes wrong, they kill us. Rabbits, foxes, are safer. But in his gaze, there was a longing. A mammoth would provide food for weeks, maybe months. But the risk was too high. When they returned to the cave, the group greeted them with enthusiasm. The rabbit was a small victory, but important. Mira immediately began to cook. Over the fire, meat was roasted. The smell filled the cave. Mouths watered. Dinner was a feast. A generous portion was given to each person. For the first time in days, stomachs were satisfied. Morale rose. Tomorrow, Call announced the plans. We'll hunt more. We'll build reserves. We can spend the winter here. How long will we stay? Mira asked. As long as necessary. Until spring comes. Until the glaciers melt a bit. Then we'll migrate south. The plan was reasonable. The cave was a safe shelter. Here, they could get through the winter months. Spring would bring new beginnings. At night around the fire, the group told stories, past hunts, old times, legends. Even laughter was heard. After a long time, genuine joy. Torin danced by the fire. His small body created shadows in the light of the flames. Innocent, joyful, hopeful, Mira watched her son. Tears gathered in her eyes. They were tears of happiness. They had survived. Her son was laughing. Sometimes that was enough. However, on the third day, nature reminded them again of its power. In the afternoon, the sky suddenly darkened. New clouds were coming from the north. Fast, angry, dark. New storm. Cole shared his observation. His voice was worried. Indeed, toward evening the wind started again. This time, even more intense than before. The sound was terrible, as if the world was screaming. The group took shelter in the cave. The fire was enlarged. Stones were piled at the cave's mouth to partially block the wind. Throughout the night, the storm continued with fury. The wind shook the cave. Snow flew inside. Cold seeped in like a sinister enemy. But now, they were prepared. They had food. They had fire. And most importantly, they had hope. Nara continued to tell stories. Ancient heroes. Those who defied storms. Those who resisted glaciers. Her words encouraged. Once upon a time, she said, there was a tribe, just like us. A giant storm came. It lasted for days. But they persisted. They stayed in their cave. They held each other. And when the storm passed, they came out. They lived, and their children told their story. Just as I'm doing now. Will we be a story too? Torin asked. Yes, my child. If we survive, our story will be told, from generation to generation. You will tell your grandchildren. Their grandchildren, forever. The idea was empowering. They were not just individuals. They were links in a chain. Coming from the past, going to the future. For 4 days, going outside was impossible. The storm continued relentlessly. But the cave remained safe, and the tribe stayed together. Activities were simple. Sleep, eat, talk, think. Measuring time was difficult. Day or night wasn't clear. Just existing. On the morning of the 5th day, a miracle occurred. The storm suddenly stopped. The wind ceased. Snowfall ended, and the sky cleared. The group looked outside in disbelief. It had truly ended. The sun filtered through the clouds. Its rays fell on the snow. The sparkle was dazzling. It's over, Mira whispered. It's really over. Everyone emerged from the cave. Took deep breaths. Clean air. Cold but clean. The landscape was incredible. Snow mountains had risen almost high enough to close the cave's mouth, but they dug through. Outside, the world had been renewed. Snow had covered everything. Past tracks were erased. A new beginning. Cole looked at the sky. Clear blue, hopeful. The worst is over, he said. Now we will survive. The words were simple, but their effect was deep. Everyone relaxed. The battle had been won. Not yet. But this battle, yes. The following days, a routine formed. Hunting, gathering, fire making, storytelling. Life settled into a simple rhythm. The tribe formed a community in the cave. Everyone had a role. Hunters provided food. Women cooked. Elders gave wisdom. Children gave hope. Torin began to make drawings on the cave walls. With stone, simple figures, animals, people, sun. He was leaving traces for future generations. Just like ancestors, Mira watched her son's art. Pride filled her chest. Her child was not just surviving. He was living, creating. Beautiful, she said. Very beautiful, my child. Torin smiled. His small face glowed with happiness. Nights continued to be long, but they were no longer frightening. The cave had become a home. The fire, a center. The tribe, a family. Nara told different stories every night. Creation myths, hero epics, love stories. Each carried a lesson. Life, she said one night, is like a storm. It comes, it goes. But we remain, because we have each other. The words were simple, but true. A week later, food reserves improved. Regular hunting provided a steady supply. Rabbits, foxes, sometimes birds. Small, but sufficient. Call explored the depths of the cave. Inside, he found a larger chamber. Here, there were ancient human traces. Stone tools, old fire marks. Thousands of years ago, others had lived here. History, he murmured, always repeating. The discovery boosted the group's morale. They were not alone. In the flow of time, they were just a point. But an important point. The month changed. Time was passing slowly, but it was passing. And every day, spring was getting a little closer. One day, Mira became ill. Fever, shivering, weakness. In the Ice Age, illness was a death sentence. Nara tried ancient remedies, herbs, roots, water. But whether they were effective was uncertain. Torin sat beside his mother. His small hand held his mother's hand. You'll get better, mother. I promise. Mira tried to smile. Yes, my child. I'll get better. Days passed. Mira slowly recovered. Was it Nara's remedies, or the body's own strength? It wasn't clear, but the result mattered. She had survived. The tribe celebrated with joy. Another battle had been won. But nature never forgave. One night, a wolf pack appeared near the cave. They were hungry, desperate, and they were considering attacking humans. Call and the hunters immediately took action. Fire was created. Stones were thrown. Shouts, screams. The wolves retreated, but they didn't move away completely. Outside, they waited. Eyes glowed in the darkness. We must keep watch, Call decided. Every night, someone must stay awake. An order was established. In turns, everyone kept watch. Exhausting but necessary. The wolves prowled around the cave for days, but they didn't dare to enter. Fire kept them away. Finally, they found another prey and moved away. Danger had once again been prevented. 2 months passed. Slowly, but determinedly, spring approached. The sun appeared a little longer each day. Temperature increased minimally, and snow began to melt slowly. One morning, Torin discovered something outside the cave. From under the snow, a green sprout had emerged. Small, delicate, but it was there. Mother, look. Green. Mira ran. She saw. She couldn't believe it. Green. After long months. Real green. The group gathered with excitement. Everyone gazed at that small sprout. as if it were a miracle. Perhaps it was. Spring is coming, Nara whispered. The world is being reborn. The words were filled with hope. In the following days, more greenery appeared. Grasses, flowers. Life was emerging from under the glaciers. Animals also returned. Birds chirping, deer migrating, rabbits more abundant. Call made a decision. It's time to go south. Warmer lands, more food. The group prepared. The cave had protected them through the winter. But now, it was time to move. On the last night, Nara told a farewell story. This cave, she said, became a shelter. It saved our lives. But now, we need to move forward. Because life means movement. The moment we stop, we accept death. In the morning, the tribe emerged from the cave. The sun was shining brightly. The air was relatively warm. The landscape had changed. There was still ice, but it was diminishing. The group headed south. They walked. Feet advanced not in snow, but on earth. Green was slowly increasing. A week later, they reached a plain. Here, mammoth herds were grazing, but now they weren't aggressive. They were just living peacefully. The tribe set up a camp in the plain. Not temporary, but longer term. Here, they would spend spring, maybe summer. New beginnings were visible everywhere. Mira realized she was pregnant. New life would be born. The cycle was continuing. Torin ran in the plain, laughed, played. Childhood had finally become possible. One evening, the group gathered around the fire. Nara told one last story. This winter, she said, we fought, we suffered, we lost, but we survived. And now, spring is here. New life is beginning. Our children will tell this story, and their children, forever. We, Call added, are history. We are humanity. Glaciers came, but couldn't destroy us. Because we adapt. We survive. The fire lowered. Stars shone. And in the distance, a wolf howled, but it was no longer frightening. Just a part of nature. The tribe prepared to sleep. Tomorrow would be a new day. New struggles, new victories. But tonight, there was peace. Because they had survived. If this helped you unwind tonight, you can tap like to support the journey.